Israeli-Palestinian conflict peace process. Oslo Accords, 1993. In 1993, Israeli officials led by Yitzhak Rabin and Palestinian leaders from the Palestine Liberation Organization led by Yasser Arafat strove to find a peaceful solution through what became known as the Oslo peace process. A crucial milestone in this process was Arafat's letter of recognition of Israel's right to exist. In 1993, the Oslo Accords were finalized as a framework for future Israeli-Palestinian relations. The crux of the Oslo Agreement was that Israel would gradually cede control of the Palestinian territories over to the Palestinians in exchange for peace. The Oslo process was delicate and progressed in fits and starts. The process took a turning point at the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin and finally unraveled when Arafat and Ehud Barak failed to reach agreement at Camp David in July 2000. Robert Malley, Special Assistant to U.S. President Bill Clinton for Arab-Israeli Affairs, has confirmed that while Barak made no formal written offer to Arafat, the U.S. did present concepts for peace which were considered by the Israeli side yet left unanswered by Arafat. The Palestinians' principal failing is that from the beginning of the Camp David summit onward they were unable either to say yes to the American ideas or to present a cogent and specific counter-proposal of their own. Consequently, there are different accounts of the proposals considered. Camp David Summit, 2000. In July 2000, U.S. President Bill Clinton convened a peace summit between Palestinian President Yasser Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Barak reportedly put forward the following as basis for negotiation: via the U.S. to the Palestinian president, a non-militarized Palestinian state split into 3 to 4 parts containing 87 to 92% of the West Bank including only parts of East Jerusalem, and the entire Gaza Strip. The offer also included that 69 Jewish settlements, which comprise 85% of the West Bank's Jewish settlers, would be ceded to Israel, no right of return to Israel, no sovereignty over the Temple Mount or any core East Jerusalem neighborhoods, and continued Israel control over the Jordan Valley. Arafat rejected this offer. According to the Palestinian negotiators, the offer did not remove many of the elements of the Israeli occupation regarding land, security, settlements, and Jerusalem. President Clinton reportedly requested that Arafat make a counteroffer, but he proposed none. Former Israeli Foreign Minister Shlomo Ben-Ami, who kept a diary of the negotiations, said in an interview in 2001, when asked whether the Palestinians made a counter-proposal, "No. And that is the heart of the matter. Never, in the negotiations between us and the Palestinians, was there a Palestinian counter-proposal." In a separate interview in 2006, Ben-Ami stated that were he a Palestinian he would have rejected the Camp David offer. No tenable solution was crafted which would satisfy both Israeli and Palestinian demands, even under intense U.S. pressure. Clinton has long blamed Arafat for the collapse of the summit. In the months following the summit, Clinton appointed former U.S. Senator George J. Mitchell to lead a fact-finding committee aiming to identify strategies for restoring the peace process. The committee's findings were published in 2001 with the dismantlement of existing Israeli settlements and Palestinian crackdown on militant activity being one strategy. Developments following Camp David. Following the failed summit, Palestinian and Israeli negotiators continued to meet in small groups through August and September 2000 to try to bridge the gaps between their respective positions. The United States prepared its own plan to resolve the outstanding issues. Clinton's presentation of the U.S. proposals was delayed by the advent of the Second Intifada at the end of September. Clinton's plan, eventually presented on December 23, 2000, proposed the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip and 94 to 96% of the West Bank plus the equivalent of 1 to 3% of the West Bank in land swaps from pre-1967 Israel. On Jerusalem, the plan stated that the general principle is that Arab areas are Palestinian and that Jewish areas are Israeli. The holy sites were to be split on the basis that Palestinians would have sovereignty over the Temple Mount/Noble Sanctuary, while the Israelis would have sovereignty over the Western Wall. On refugees, the plan suggested a number of proposals including financial compensation, the right of return to the Palestinian state, and Israeli acknowledgement of suffering caused to the Palestinians in 1948. Security proposals referred to a non-militarized Palestinian state, and an international force for border security. Both sides accepted Clinton's plan and it became the basis for the negotiations at the Taba Peace Summit the following January. Taba Summit, 2001. The Israeli negotiation team presented a new map at the Taba Summit in Taba, Egypt in January 2001. The proposition removed the temporarily Israeli-controlled areas, and the Palestinian side accepted this as a basis for further negotiation. With Israeli elections looming, the talks ended without an agreement, but the two sides issued a joint statement attesting to the progress they had made. The sides declare that they have never been closer to reaching an agreement, and it is thus our shared belief that the remaining gaps could be bridged with the resumption of negotiations following the Israeli elections. The following month, the Likud Party candidate Ariel Sharon defeated Ehud Barak in the Israeli elections and was elected as Israeli Prime Minister on February 7, 2001. Sharon's new government chose not to resume the high-level talks. Roadmap for Peace. One peace proposal, presented by the Quartet of the European Union, Russia, the United Nations and the United States on September 17, 2002, was the Roadmap for Peace. This plan did not attempt to resolve difficult questions such as the fate of Jerusalem or Israeli settlements, but left that to be negotiated in later phases of the process. The proposal never made it beyond the first phase, whose goals called for a halt to both Israeli settlement construction and Israeli-Palestinian violence. Neither goal has been achieved as of November 2015. Arab Peace Initiative. The Arab Peace Initiative, Arabic, Mubadirat as-Salam al-Arabiya, was first proposed by Crown Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia in the Beirut Summit. The peace initiative is a proposed solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict as a whole, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in particular. The initiative was initially published on March 28, 2002, at the Beirut Summit, and agreed upon again in 2007 in the Riyadh Summit. Unlike the Roadmap for Peace, it spelled out final solution borders based explicitly on the UN borders established before the 1967 Six-Day War. It offered full normalization of relations with Israel, in exchange for the withdrawal of its forces from all the occupied territories, including the Golan Heights, to recognize an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as well as a just solution for the Palestinian refugees. A number of Israeli officials have responded to the initiative with both support and criticism. The Israeli government has expressed reservations on red line issues such as the Palestinian refugee problem, homeland security concerns, and the nature of Jerusalem. However, the Arab League continues to raise it as a possible solution, and meetings between the Arab League and Israel have been held. Present status. The peace process has been predicated on a two-state solution thus far, but questions have been raised towards both sides' resolve to end the dispute. An article by S. Daniel Abraham, an American entrepreneur and founder of the Center for Middle East Peace in Washington, U.S., published on the website of The Atlantic magazine in March 2013, cited the following statistics. Right now, the total number of Jews and Arabs living in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza is just under 12 million people. At the moment, a shade under 50% of the population is Jewish. Israel's settlement policy. Israel has had its settlement growth and policies in the Palestinian territories harshly criticized by the European Union, citing it as increasingly undermining the viability of the two-state solution and running in contrary to the Israeli stated commitment to resume negotiations. In December 2011, all the regional groupings on the UN Security Council named continued settlement construction and settler violence as disruptive to the resumption of talks, a call viewed by Russia as a historic step. In April 2012, international outrage followed Israeli steps to further entrench the Jewish settlements in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, which included the publishing of tenders for further settler homes and the plan to legalize settler outposts. Britain said that the move was a breach of Israeli commitments under the roadmap to freeze all settlement expansion in the land captured since 1967. The British Foreign Minister stated that the systematic, illegal Israeli settlement activity poses the most significant and live threat to the viability of the two-state solution. In May 2012, the 27 foreign ministers of the European Union issued a statement which condemned continued Israeli settler violence and incitement. In a similar move, the Quartet expressed its concern over ongoing settler violence and incitement in the West Bank, calling on Israel to take effective measures, including bringing the perpetrators of such acts to justice. The Palestinian Mon news agency reported the PA cabinet's statement on the issue stated that the West, including East Jerusalem, We're seeing an escalation in incitement and settler violence against our people with a clear protection from the occupation military. The last of which was the thousands of settler march in East Jerusalem, which included slogans inciting to kill, hate and supports violence. Israeli military police. In a report published in February 2014 covering incidents over the three-year period of 2011 to 2013, Amnesty International asserted that Israeli forces employed reckless violence in the West Bank, and in some instances appeared to engage in willful killings which would be tantamount to war crimes. Besides the numerous fatalities, Amnesty said at least 261 Palestinians, including 67 children, had been gravely injured by Israeli use of live ammunition. In this same period, 45 Palestinians, including 6 children, had been killed. Amnesty's review of 25 civilians' deaths concluded that in no case was there evidence of the Palestinians posing an imminent threat. At the same time, over 8,000 Palestinians suffered serious injuries from other means, including rubber-coated metal bullets. Only one IDF soldier was convicted, killing a Palestinian attempting to enter Israel illegally. The soldier was demoted and given a 1-year sentence with a 5-month suspension. The IDF answered the charges stating that its army held itself to the highest of professional standards, adding that when there was suspicion of wrongdoing, it investigated and took action where appropriate. Incitement. Following the Oslo Accords, which was to set up regulative bodies to rein in frictions, Palestinian incitement against Israel, Jews, and Zionism continued, parallel with Israel's pursuance of settlements in the Palestinian territories, though under Abu Mazen it has reportedly dwindled significantly. Charges of incitement have been reciprocal, both sides interpreting media statements in the Palestinian and Israeli press as constituting incitement. In Israeli usage, the term also covers failures to mention Israel's culture and history in Palestinian textbooks. Perpetrators of murderous attack, whether against Israelis or Palestinians, often find strong vocal support from sections of their communities despite varying levels of condemnation from politicians. Both parties to the conflict have been criticized by third parties for teaching incitement to their children by downplaying each side's historical ties to the area, teaching propagandist maps, or indoctrinate their children to one day join the armed forces. UN and the Palestinian state. The PLO have campaigned for full member status for the State of Palestine at the UN and for recognition on the 1967 borders. A campaign that has received widespread support, though it has been criticized by the US and Israel for allegedly avoiding bilateral negotiation. Netanyahu has criticized the Palestinians of purportedly trying to bypass direct talks, whereas Abbas has argued that the continued construction of Israeli Jewish settlements is undermining the realistic potential for the two-state solution. Although Palestine has been denied full member status by the UN Security Council, in late 2012 the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly approved the de facto recognition of sovereign Palestine by granting non-member state status. Public support. Polling data has produced mixed results regarding the level of support among Palestinians for the two-state solution. A poll was carried out in 2011 by the Hebrew University. It indicated that support for a two-state solution was growing among both Israelis and Palestinians. The poll found that 58% of Israelis and 50% of Palestinians supported a two-state solution based on the Clinton parameters, compared with 47% of Israelis and 39% of Palestinians in 2003, the first year the poll was carried out. The poll also found that an increasing percentage of both populations supported an end to violence, 63% of Palestinians and 70% of Israelis expressing their support for an end to violence, an increase of 2% for Israelis and 5% for Palestinians from the previous year.